As a very young child, no, I wasn't a fan of the original Thunderbirds franchise. Although I do recall that my two brothers, one of which was Thomas, owned a Scott Tracy action figure, but we didn't necessarily know it was Scott Tracy. We also had a VHS called Stand By for Action, which comprised of clips from Thunderbirds, as well as two other TV shows that were made by the same people, entitled Stingray and Captain Scarlet. But other than all that, I didn't know about Thunderbirds at all as a very young child. I guess you could say that the only real time I started properly to know about it was in like 2005, so I would have been like 8 or 9 at the time. My mother had bought me the 2004 live action adaptation of the franchise on DVD. And I know this is like an odd choice. That would be the first thing to get into regarding Thunderbirds. But bear in mind, people, if it hadn't have been for that film, I wouldn't have known about Thunderbirds at all, hands down. Shortly afterwards, I had the 6th volume of the original Thunderbirds TV show as part of the franchise. I had a Tracy Island playset along with a few toys of all the Thunderbird machines. But even then, I didn't know the ins and outs of the original franchise as I do now. Where it really started to kick off my interest in the original Thunderbirds franchise was in 2011, when I was still at Westfield Arts College, and I saw a student bring in a complete series DVD box set. And from that moment on, I thought, this is it. I've just got to own that series. And I still do to this day, and I think that Thunderbirds is a very good TV show. And the interest does still hold up. There are some parts of it that do make it a little dated, because it was, you know, from back in the 60s. But overall, I would say that Thunderbirds is a really good show. And it's amazing what the crew managed to pull off back then in those times.
Well, I did watch repeats of Thunderbirds on BBC Two when I was a kid. And of course I give it credit for being a British staple and all. I would sometimes go back to it for nostalgic feelings. And maybe even think of fan fiction of this sometimes.
Mixed feelings. I quite enjoyed it, but it used to scare me a little bit sometimes when it all got a bit hectic. But yeah, I suppose you could say I was a fan.
Definitely Parker, probably because he was the one who had the most character development in that series. I mean, Jeff Tracy was just like the founder and head operative of the organisation, who had a wife who sadly lost her life, and for that reason, as well as the reason of a terrible event that happened where so many people lost their lives, and partly the reason for this was because of unconventional rescue equipment. That is what convinced him to found the organisation. Out of the Tracy brothers, Scott was pretty much like the leading boy. Like, you know, during the rescue operations, he would tell the other brothers what to do, and he would only get in contact with his father if there was some real big problems going on. Virgil was like the daring brother who tried to pull off the rescues on both his father and his brother Scott's instructions. John Tracy was just the poor man stuck up in Thunderbird 5 in space with not a very good social life at all. Alan was like the toddler of the Tracy brothers, who, if there was something that he wanted to do, the Tracy brothers, or, well, the family really, would not allow because he was too young for it. Lady Penelope was your stereotypical young aristocrat who, you know, almost certainly wanted everything prim and proper but was willing to be a secret agent. But Parker especially, even though people can regard him as a Cockney stereotype, he's still a very likeable character. And as I said before, he went through the most character development. He went from being a safecracker and cat burglar to her ladyship's very trusted butler and chauffeur, and some of his safe-cracking skills would come in useful if the missions that were commissioned by International Rescue needed them. And the voice is, well, the voice is also very likeable too. That's what makes Parker a good bloke and a very trusted butler.
I have to say, while doing this project, one of my favourite characters of Thunderbirds is actually the Hood. Even though his story is not fully explained in the show, you have to sympathise with that type of villain. Even though he wasn't called the Hood in the series, but he actually should have gotten his own backstory.
I think that would have to be Parker, because he is a character, isn't he? I mean, the way he looks, the way he speaks, the lovely relationship he has with Lady Penelope, I think he's great.
The idea to make my film came about back in like 2011, as my interest in the original Thunderbirds series started to kick off. Having bought the entire series on DVD, that was one of my greatest ambitions for a long time, actually, to do any sort of project to do with that particular franchise. And I think I did actually plan a series of it that was to be done in like PowerPoint animation, and I actually shared the ideas with my best friend Thomas Puttock. But as time went on, I mean, obviously it would be a lot of work to make a series with a lot of episodes done in that animation. So somehow or other, as time went on, we came to the conclusion it would just be one film. And like one of the ideas of the series that I was going to do was like, the last episodes were going to like close the franchise, and that's what the film essentially ended up being, the closure to this franchise. Captain Scarlet, I mean, obviously he was like a completely different character from another show that was made, as I said before, by the same people who did Thunderbirds. But why he came into the plot was because Thomas Puttock, my best friend, had been doing some research on shows made by Gerry Anderson. And he said that there was an element that appeared in both the first episode of Captain Scarlet as well as one of the Thunderbirds feature films, and with that element in mind, that's how the two series were connected. And he even suggested me to do a Captain Scarlet crossover when I was planning the original series. And when I came to make the film, I thought, well, I had this good idea suggested by my best friend Thomas. Why not? Sounds like a good idea. And it certainly would be a tremendous surprise for fans to see Thunderbirds and Captain Scarlet appear together.
Well, when I was watching Thunderbirds Go and getting back into Captain Scarlet at the time, I had noticed that the Zero-X shuttle from Thunderbirds Go and the Captain Scarlet and the Mysteron's pilot actually could be part of the same universe. So I thought it would be an idea as not just as a Thunderbirds conclusion to the show, but also as a bit of a crossover.
the thing about the casting in my productions, I mean, like, we would always have trouble trying to find good actors who would be willing to take part in my films, particularly if I'm doing live action. That would be a major challenge. For this, as I'm doing animation with voiceovers, that would be slightly more easy because you can have different actors playing a variety of different characters. But even then, it still can be very hard to decide what you can do. Back when I did Bodger and Badger the movie, I was pretty much the only voice actor in that film. And the only other two people who did do voiceovers at all were my father Richard, who narrated the film, and my mother Fiona, who played a newsreader in that film too. But for Thunderbirds The Final Showdown, I was lucky to have a variety. Obviously, I myself played some of the main characters, like Jeff Tracy and Scott Tracy and John and Alan and Parker, because I almost certainly seem to be very good at it. I also played Captain Black as well, and all the other Mr. Ons that sound exactly the same. I had Jerry De La Rue playing Virgil, Gordon and Brains and Andrew the Hostage, and as well as a few other little guest characters. Thomas Puttock I assigned to play Captain Scarlet and the Hood, having known his fascination in Thunderbirds and Captain Scarlet. My good friend Adam Knight played the voice of Patrick the Hostage. His good friend Lewis Ford plays an American policeman who appears right at the end of the film as International Rescue's name is getting cleared. Katherine Gell, who was my school teacher when I was very young, played the voice of Lady Penelope. My mother played Olivia the Hostage, and yeah, I think that was pretty much it in the casting. So yeah, why I cast who I cast were, well, depended on their interests as well as the kind of voices that they could do and how passionate they were about taking part in my film. So yeah, well, variety was something that worked out here.
Well, I was actually involved with George's projects, mostly in his Doctor Who fan series as Edward Parker. And when he asked about Thunderbirds The Final Showdown if I would actually be part of this, I said yes, and he even offered me to play the role as the Hood and Captain Scarlet.
Well, I've known George since he was 5, and we've kept in touch, and he just asked me one day if I'd be interested in doing the voice, and I said yes, I would.
Almost certainly yes. A few bits were difficult, like you know, like fearing that I might not capture the accuracy of some of the voices that were done. I mean, Scott probably wasn't too bad. Alan, looking back on it, I probably didn't sound that much like Matt Zimmerman, but I did okay, I suppose. Parker, that was probably the voice I had the most fun working on. He's very likeable, good bloke, and I'm sure David Graham himself would approve of my attempt to capture the charms of this beautiful voice. Like I said, there were a few difficulties that came into doing the voiceovers, but generally speaking, yeah, I did enjoy it. And Parker was probably the character I had the most fun on.
I have to say, I do mostly play villains from time to time, but playing as both the Hood and Captain Scarlet was actually mostly fun of all. It gave me a chance to play two different characters with different personalities.
I listened to the clips that George had sent me with Lady Penelope's voice and had a little practice. I'm not sure quite how good it was, but thankfully George seemed to be okay with it. So I wouldn't say it was troubles, but a little bit of practice.
Well, obviously, like the animation and thing, give Thunderbirds: The Final Showdown some credit. The animation did like improve. Back when I was doing Bodger and Badger in the movie, it was pretty much frame by frame by frame by frame by frame. But with this film, with the background selected and some of like the assets for the characters and like the crafts and whatever that needed to move, I relied on Premiere Pro to do the movement for me rather than just do frame by frame by frame. And obviously the lip sync was another step up, even though it did take a long time because you need to capture the speaking in sync perfectly, and also like one of the other difficulties were like as I said about the fact that the voice actors I had the variety of voice actors, like, because they were different people, they would have to like record their voices like in their own time, and like it would be, in fact some of them would even have to like send their dialogue, and it would take probably some time to do it. But yeah, I think probably one of the biggest problems was like the fear of getting the whole thing done in time for the time I proposed. And like I think I almost entirely finished the film about 11 days before my premiere or something like that. The amount of hand movements that you see in the film, there were going to be a lot more. The only ones that ended up staying in the film were Jeff Tracy looking at the newspaper, and when Scott and Penelope and Alan and Tintin give their rings and whatever. Obviously the original series did like real hand movements as well, because the puppets could not pick anything up. But yeah, hand movements was something I tried to incorporate, and I only went down to 2 as time was running out. And the biggest problems for those was like because like we had to literally put our hands under the camera, it did get a little bit cramped, especially when you had to bend down and whatever and come behind the camera like this, so that would be some difficulty. So yeah, that was the troubles I had to go through in this film. Mainly like the real hand movements and the fear of getting the film done in time, because it was a lot of work. I think I had to work all summer holidays to get the entire second part done. So yeah, it was a race against time, that was. Definitely well worth it. I am proud of what I managed to accomplish with this film. The animation was just slightly more superior than Bodger and Badger the movie. The variety of voice actors came together really well. The editing came together really well, like the PowerPoint animation and the stock footage from the original productions, Thunderbirds productions and Captain Scarlet productions, worked really well to blend in with the scene. And yeah, pretty much I'm proud of this film. I can't think of any weaknesses on it as for this moment, but I would say that definitely better than Bodger and Badger the movie in terms of what has happened. And hopefully if any Thunderbirds fan is watching this, I have made a satisfying closure to this very iconic franchise. Yeah.
I would say it's actually a pretty decent movie. movie. Not like the ones you see in the cinema, but one of those little fan film YouTube videos you would want to see during the summer. I would have to say it's enjoyably fun.
I was really impressed. I thought it all ran smoothly. The characters' voices were great. The music that George had chosen to bring into the various scenes worked so well. And I was really, really impressed.